We're back on the most important stop of the day, the most important NASCAR betting stop that is. This is the Money Stop presented by Kickin the Tires and SharpLink Gaming. He's Cole Cusimano. I'm Steven Cusimano. And as we continue this heater we've been on, Cole, how about back-to-back wins for Chris Buescher? This is something that I don't think anyone could have predicted coming into the summer, the season, you name it. I mean, Chris Buescher, I mentioned there was the inkling of maybe a first-time / surprise 2023 winner last week, but who would have predicted he wins again at Michigan? Again, a bread-and-butter track on the circuit, 1.5-mile, 2-mile, intermediate kind of super speedway where we've seen the Hendrick Chevys dominate, but it really feels like that it was a statement win for Roush Fenway-Keselowski, which, again, we predicted a big week for that team. I don't know that we necessarily knew it would be Chris Buescher 2 weeks in a row, but the word that comes to mind for me is statement. This was a big win for Chris Buescher and that 17 team to show this is not a flash in the pan. This is a team that wants to contend to win a championship. And based on what we've seen the last 2 weeks, peaking at the right time, there's no reason why the sky can't be the limit for them.
Yeah, this was an insane victory for Chris Buescher and RFK. Top 4 finish for both those cars. I did predict back-to-back RFK wins, but not necessarily from Chris Buescher, so kudos to them. And it was a well-earned win too, man. Both these weeks, as a matter of fact, between Richmond and Michigan. I know it wasn't the typical Michigan race that we usually see with a lot of green flag racing, fuel mileage strategy, all that fun stuff. But let's not forget, this race was suspended on Sunday, continued on Monday, and not only did Buescher win this completely chaotic race, he also held off Martin Truex Jr. on a Monday, which I think is a monumental achievement on its own. So what an incredible race. I think you saw a lot of teams struggle, much like last weekend at Richmond, beginning practice and qualifying. A lot of heavy hitters with trouble in this race. Kyle Busch, Chase Elliott is the big name that comes to mind. Obviously, William Byron as well. But this was a crazy race. I think you're 1,000% correct in saying it was a statement victory for RFK Racing. And I think they're definitely peaking into form at the right time with 3 races remaining in the regular season.
It kind of feels like we've had, to this point in the year, maybe 3 segments in the season. It's like the Hendrick Chevys were the dominant cars, that first third. Then it was kind of the Joe Gibbs Toyotas, and it kind of still is. But I think we're kind of now entering a part of the season where I think we're going to start to see the Fords run up front very consistently. And I think this is the first inkling of it because RFK has been at the forefront of it and very competitive along with the likes of, obviously, the Penske cars on a weekly basis. But as we look at the recap of our top 10 results from Michigan, you mentioned Martin Truex Jr. being held off on a Monday. That should count for 2 wins, to be honest with you. Denny Hamlin wound up 3rd. Brad Kay in 4th, who was your pick to win, as another strong performance. And I'm sure he wants to get in victory lane soon, too. And then, Kyle Larson rounded out the top 5, which was one of the other big storylines that you alluded to was he was the only Hendrick Chevy that even finished the race. You had all 3 others, Bowman, Byron, and Chase Elliott. They all ran into trouble and finished in the back of the field. So that was not a banner day for HMS. And then you had Daniel Suarez in the top 6, finishing 6th. Ross Chastain, after the strong Sunday, kind of wavered on Monday and finished 7th. Kevin Harvick finished 8th. I think we were both surprised he did not wind up in the top 5 as far as the Fords go, but he did wind up at the top 10. Ryan Blaney, another one of our sleepers, wound up 9th. And then another sleeper of ours, which, again, we mentioned last week that we were very confident in our sleepers and value picks. Eric Jones, the Michigan native, rounded out the top 10. So I think that, obviously, those are kind of the big storylines, the struggles of Hendrick Motorsports, the upswing in some of these Ford teams. And again, just looking at that top 10, it's a lot of names that we really forecasted to be there.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm counting this correctly, I think we have 70% of the top 10 that was included in our episode last week. So we had a bit of an off week at Richmond, I'll give us that, but definitely rebounded really strongly this past weekend at Michigan. And even like guys not in the top 10, one guy that came out of nowhere, and he was our Michigan moneymaker, I'm going to call it, was Corey LaJoie. He ran around the top 10 pretty much all day. This was hot off the heels of a recent contract extension with Spire Motorsports. So I think picking up on that was very telling for our analysis this season and how we're trending in these final, 13 races of the season now. Weird to say, but Overall, we did a really good job forecasting a really chaotic Michigan race, and I think this entire season and our 2 seasons that we've done prior to this one, road courses have been our bread and butter. I think Indianapolis is a little bit more difficult to forecast given the once again chaotic nature on the restarts, but I'm hoping that since NASCAR moved the restart zone this year, that it'll make this race have a more of a natural feel, to be more of a rhythm to it. Won't be wrecking guys going into turn one every single restart. So I'm very hopeful for this week. I think we're going to have a really good analysis once again, as we always do on these style tracks. And I love the positive momentum for us and for the sport right now. It's been a really fun time to be a NASCAR fan and part of the Money Stop Mafia.
I'll throw one more name out there too, Cole, as you're 100% right. Ty Gibbs was my favorite sleeper for the win. He had an excellent race and finished one spot outside the top 10 and 11th. So just looking at overall, even outside the top 10, we just did such a great job from those sleepers on down, forecasting which drivers would be the surprises that really turned some heads at Michigan. And coming into Indy at this road course, like you said, it's been our bread and butter. I fully expect that we can continue to steamroll with some of this momentum for the Money Stop Mafia. We're going to find the starting lineup out at Saturday, 12:35 Eastern time. And of course, we're always going to caution you to make sure that you take that into account. Take what we say into consideration, but you're also going to want to pile that in with whatever the starting lineup is before you lock in any bets, unless there's a good value that maybe you're trying to take advantage of before the starting lineup. So just keep that in mind. And we're going to also start to transition one of our segments to social media exclusively on specific weeks. We've gotten some big requests on parlay bets, prop bets that we want to make some extra time for. And so rather than taking up the majority of your hour, we're going to talk a little bit about our nickel or dime segment on @_MoneyStop social media. And if you may be new to the Money Stop, this is where we rank paint schemes for the week. There's a graphic that Cole makes every single week that has all of the, it's all of the, special or non-primary paint schemes of the week. That'll be on our Money Stop social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And we'll give some dimes, which are 10s out of 10s, or nickels, which are basically 5s out of 10. So we had some additional requests for different bets that we're going to talk about later in the episode after we take it to the bank. And so we're going to discuss nickel or dime on social media. So both Cole and I will comment on the graphic on Instagram, Twitter, wherever you're looking. We're going to have our thoughts on there, and we want to know what yours are too. So this is a good reminder to help you, direct you, I guess I should say, to @_MoneyStop on social media. So vote on the dimes of the week. That'll help us determine the silver dollar contenders, which at the end of the year, so something we enjoy doing during the off season, is we'll kind of make a bracket of all of these dimes of the year, and we'll have a silver dollar, which is basically the paint scheme of the year award. So we love our paint schemes here, but today wanted to make some extra room for betting analysis based on some requests that we had for parlay bets. As we do take it to the bank, though, Cole, the odds per SharpLink Gaming and BetMGM pre-qualifying lead off with the guy who is going to be the favorite at basically every track we go to, because he has really established himself as the dominant car and driver and team to beat on a weekly basis. Martin Truex Jr. is the favorite, plus 500 for the win, plus 160 for a top three. And then not far behind him, though, as we head to Indy, Tyler Reddick, who's had a really good feel for this course, is plus 525. Chase Elliott, despite the cold stretch as of late, is still being highly valued by Vegas at plus 700 for the win. And then the man, the myth, the legend, Shane Van Gisbergen at plus 850 for the win in his second career NASCAR Cup Series start after he won the first ever Chicago street course race. He is valued at the fourth highest odds. Kyle Busch is valued at 1,100, plus 1,100 that is, to round out the top five. So as we kind of break this up into tiers, Cole, we're going to start with our favorites category. And I'll just kick things off by talking about, again, the guy that has dominated every track we've gone to. But I think if you had to pick one track or type of track that he's really excelled at this year, thinking about the road courses and what he did at Sonoma. This was one of the most dominant races of the year. I still haven't said his name. Martin Truex Jr. dominated at Sonoma, but outside of that, hasn't been the best at road courses. So I'm proceeding with a little bit of caution. Obviously, last year had a 17.8 average finish at the road courses, but I just think we've seen that team on such a roll this year that I feel really good about Martin Truex Jr. at any track we go to. So until further notice, in my book, he's a favorite every single week. But again, proceeding with a little bit of caution, he has no finish better than 15th at the Indy road course, no finish worse than 7th in the last 4 races this season, though. So I'm basing a lot of this logic off of how he is a hot driver and a hot team, which has led laps in the last 5 races consecutively. He is the most expensive driver at $10,500 in daily fantasy, and again, the favorite at plus 500 for the win. So I think based on the fact that road courses have not been Truex's bread and butter in his career, the fact that he is still the overwhelming favorite by Vegas tells you everything you need to know about how hot that team is. They could very easily have won the last 5 races in a row, and that's why I think that Truex is going to be a favorite regardless of what track, what week. It doesn't matter. He's going to be a favorite for the win. And I'll jump over to a guy that has had a great track record at road courses, but has not had a recent good history, and that's Chase Elliott. He's in must-win territory after having the spin on Sunday, the first installment of the race that ended on Monday at Michigan. Chase needed a good run to stay in good standing in the points. Did not get that. Finished, I believe, second to last. So he is in must-win territory. So for Chase, top 5s at Sonoma and Chicago this year. Again, a guy that you certainly think of when you're thinking about road courses. Worth noting, he did not race at COTA this year, but last season he had 4 top 10s in 6 road course starts, and he finished 4th in 2021 at the Indy road course with laps led, 16th last year with an average running position of 11th. So I think you're looking at a day where Chase Elliott could be poised for a bounce back. Again, really, you could argue the next 2 weeks in a row are as good a chance as he's going to have, because obviously at the cutoff race of Daytona, you don't know what's going to happen. And you go to Watkins Glen, which of course next week is a track that Chase Elliott is historically been one of the best in his career. But ranking the next 3 races in terms of strengths of his, this would be number 2 on that list of 3 in terms of controlling what you can control. And at plus 700 for the win, Chase Elliott needs to win. He's not stage racing. He's not point racing. The 9 team needs to win at 10,000 in daily fantasy. Those are 2 drivers. Truex, who's been hot lately, going to pick him any week at any track we go to. Chase Elliott, I like him more as a winner pick, plus 700, than I do for daily fantasy, because I'll say it's a little bit of a go for broke kind of pick in our favorites category. Like, if he doesn't win, they're probably going to sacrifice or compromise strategy in order to win. So I'm not crazy about the value for DFS. We'll talk about some better values as we move on in the show. But I think that those are 2 differing logics, I guess you could say, on why I like Truex, why I like Chase. And so that's why I'm leading our favorites category off with those 2.
Yeah, that was perfect analysis on both those drivers. I think in reference to Truex, I know the road course resume has not really been there the last year or so, but you look at Sonoma this year, and that was really his, I would say, coming out party in 2023. And at this point in the season, I mean, no finish worse than 7th in the last 4 races, laps led in the last 5 races. He's obviously the best in the sport. He's the championship favorite, and I think you're going in looking at Martin Truex Jr. as a legitimate favorite every single week. And he's someone that's money well spent for DFS and race winner bets, obviously. Chase Elliott, I'm going to put it bluntly, I have serious doubts about him making the playoffs this season. I do not like what I've seen from this team at all. They've been a back end of the top 10 car, more of a top 15 play over the past 5 weeks. Case in point, actually all 4 Hendrick cars do not have an average finish better than 16.6 over the last 5 races. So a really good sample size, and they're really not a bunch of wild card tracks in there. So this is just a very puzzling season for me for Hendrick Motorsports. And I think, obviously, look at these next 3 races. I think you're 1,000% correct in saying this is the second best in terms of being in control for Chase and Alan Gustafson. I would definitely be more inclined to pick him next week at Watkins Glen, where I think this is the best track by far on the circuit. But this is one of the road courses also historically where Chase has not been the best. I know he has the one good finish here in the first race, but he was a top 15 car last year, as made exemplified by his finish and running position. So I'm not as high on Chase this week. I think you're 1,000% right in saying he's more of a better race winner pick, because it is desperation time. They're going to be going for wins. They're not going to be stage racing. That really means nothing at this point. So you're picking Chase. You're picking him for the race win, not for DFS at $10,000. But we go to any road course, I think you got to think of Tyler Reddick as the new ace, in my opinion, over Chase Elliott. Dominated Coda this year and Indianapolis last year. And as far as road courses in 2022, he was the best of the best. 5 top 10s and 6 starts, 2 wins, laps led in all but 1 race. But the problem for me is the pit road problems, which were fully on display last week at Michigan. And this is no new occurrence. It's been going on all season, and it's been troubling for this team because the dominance has been there. They've led in the last 3 races with dominant speed, but in the last 2 races, they haven't finished better than 16th. So it's a bit of a gamble, in my opinion, just thinking about the pit road problems they've had this season. But at the same time, the road course excellence has been so prominent that it'd be foolish not to, I think, have Tyler Reddick as the legitimate favorite going into this race, and I think pretty much every road course race to close out the season. But anyway, it's been a good year for him. He's been very strong, just a matter of putting it all together, and I feel like it always seems to fit perfectly at road courses. So I think Tyler Reddick at plus 525 for the race win is always worth looking at. And then I think his DFS value at 10,300 is, I mean, it's the second most expensive this week, but I think it's money well spent, and I think he should be probably the only favorite along with Truex that you're looking at to include it as your ace in the hole for your lineup. And then we'll close out the favorites category with SVG, Shane Van Gisbergen. And I want to pump the brakes here a little bit, only because this is Shane's second Cup start, and this is not a track that's as unfamiliar as the first street course race in the Cup Series. So I think, obviously, racing Trackhouse equipment, he's going to be due for a quality day. I think a top 10 day is definitely what I'm expecting out of him. Kyle Busch put it best this week. He said he expects SVG to be the favorite, but as opposed to being 8/10 better at Chicago, it'll be more like 2-3 better for this week. So I'm not quite convinced he's the favorite going in for me, but being that it's his second Cup Series start. But I do think that obviously running in the Trackhouse equipment, he's going to be due for a quality day. This is an organization coming off 2 top 10 finishes at Michigan, so I think the value at 10,100 for DFS is definitely way too steep for me, being that it's his second Cup Series start. But I think you look at his race winner value at plus 850 and thinking about what he did in Chicago, it's worth looking at, but I'm looking more so at the top 5 prop bets, top 10 prop bets, if they're worth looking at, depending on the odds. But I'm really not going to be looking at him personally for race winner or DFS.
I couldn't agree more with everything you said on SVG. I think that was, I don't want to call it a flash in the pan, but that was such a, as you perfectly said, foreign race. Like, we literally never had a street course race. That's something that SVG's done many times in his career, and that's why he was that much more dominant. I think he's a great driver. I think he's got the one race under his belt and obviously the win. So I agree with you that we can expect a top 10, 15 day. But this is a track that literally every single driver in the starting lineup, for the most part, has turned many more laps on than Shane Van Gisbergen. So I think temper expectations is a good way to put it. He was at, I think, plus 4,000 for the win in Chicago, and that was part of the reason why he was such an attractive pick that you had discussed on that week's episode here on the Money Stop. But at plus 850, it's a little steep for me. I mean, especially in daily fantasy, I'm staying far away from it. There's just better bets, I guess you could say, in terms of the fact that they all have turned laps here before. So that I'm definitely tempering expectations with SVG, and I think that Tyler Reddick has got to be, like you said, Cole, the odds-on favorite out of the favorites category. But as we go to sleepers, Cole, I'm going to kick this tier off just by saying I think this is where our winner is going to come from. I think it's going to be a sleeper. Whether it's one of these 4 guys or not, I think there's a couple guys that are fringe sleeper in this category, and I really feel that we've started to see it even recently with the back-to-back wins for Chris Buescher. There's some desperate teams out there that are going to take some desperate measures and try to win the races as badly as they need to. And I'm thinking of bubble drivers. I'm thinking of AJ Allmendinger, a guy that has done extremely well at the Indy road course. He's been inconsistent this year, and he's going through a pretty tough stretch right now with no finish better than 17th in the last 4 races. And he's minus 24 from the cut line. I think they're third driver out of the playoffs right now. it almost to me, Cole, feels like, and I could be completely off base with this, it feels like that team has been biding its time and just waiting for these two road course races. Because I know AJ knows that this is his best shot to win. You go to the Indy road course where he has no finish worse than 7th in 5 starts at this track, a 1 Cup win, 1 Xfinity win. He's one of 2 drivers with 2 top 10s at the Indy road course in Cup. So quite simply, if you're going to pick a Mount Rushmore of drivers that have done excellent at the Indy road course, it is AJ Allmendinger. And I know he got some flack for skipping practice last week, skipping practice and qualifying to go in the Xfinity race. However, I just think that it feels like to me, he knows that he's such an upper hand at this track and even Watkins Glen, but specifically this one. It just feels like that the Dinger's been biding his time. And I think that he is so confident at this track, I would be surprised to not see him finish in the top 5. I'll go out on a limb and say that's one of my big money bets right off the bat here. AJ to finish in the top 5 is plus 210 this week. I love that bet quite a bit. He's also plus 1,400 for the win. In daily fantasy, he is 9,300, which is one of my favorite values of the week. I'm a big fan of the Dinger this week for all those reasons mentioned. And I think the fact that he is just outside the playoff bubble, and again, the fact he doesn't have to sell out for a win. Like, we're talking about a guy that's 24 points out. He's not far behind the likes of Ty Gibbs. I think the guy like Bubba Wallace is going to be a little out of reach, but we'll talk about Daniel Suarez and Michael McDowell in a moment. But I think that those are all drivers that could perform well this week. Quite simply, to sum it all up, AJ Allmendinger does not have to sell out for the win. He's so good at this track that he's going to be running up there anyway. And I think that we can expect to see him running up front and certainly finishing in the top 5, if not winning this race by the time it's all said and done. Moving over to my next sleeper, though, Cole, it is a Joe Gibbs Toyota. Christopher Bell, only 1 top 10 at a road course this year, which is surprising in terms of the results. But we've seen him perform well at the road courses in the sense that he's had some pretty bad luck. He's led laps in the other 2 road course races this year, but has a best finish of 12th at the Indy road course a season ago. 17 laps led and a stage win in that race. And 2 of his 5 Cup wins have come on road courses. He's been dominant at times, but just inconsistent. It seems like if there's any team that's knocking on the door of being a road course ace that just hasn't been able to put all the results together, it'd be the 20 team. And Seabell is plus 1,200 for the win, 9,400 in daily fantasy. That's a value I also like a lot. I think that you think about our favorites category. We talk about the guys Vegas likes a lot, the SVGs, the Chase Elliott's, the Truex's. I really like the value I'm seeing with AJ Allmendinger and Christopher Bell, both in race winner picks and in daily fantasy. I like this tier quite a bit this week.
I'm a big fan of it as well, and I completely agree in saying that I think the winner very well could and I think honestly will come from this sleepers category. There's some incredible values, and I think you look at the races we've had in the next gen car on road courses, and there's a few names that pop up as the most dominant. It's Reddick, it's Bell. You could throw Chase Elliott in there, obviously. Allmendinger always going to perform, but there's only one guy that has 8 straight top 10s on road courses, and he just so happens to have back-to-back wins, and that's going to be Chris Buescher. So I am extremely excited to see how this team does, given how they fared on road courses going back the last 8 races. And it's crazy to think about because this is a driver that really didn't perform on these style tracks earlier in his career, but he's really hit on something as of late. And to see what this team is doing right now at this point in the season on regular oval tracks, it makes me very excited for this race, and I can't wait to see what he does. He finished 10th at Indy last year. He finished 12th in the inaugural race at this track, and we brought it up at the top of the show. RFK has asserted themselves as legitimate contenders. I think they're the best Ford team in the garage area. I'm not looking at Brad K this week. I'm all eyes are on Chris Buescher. I think all around for race winner, for a 9th straight top 10, you name it. I think Chris Buescher has got to be a lineup lock, and he's going to be someone I'm looking at for every finisher prop, to be honest with you. His value for the wins plus 2,000, and seeing as he just won back-to-back races, and given his road course status right now, that's pretty insane to me. And even his value for DFS is as steep as we've probably ever seen it at $9,200. But that's, again, as I'm going to call it, a lock for this week, just given how he's done on these tracks and this season to this point. And finally, we got to bring up Michael McDowell, obviously. And I know it's been a rough couple weeks. Definitely it's not provided for us in regards to a betting or DFS analysis. But I think when you think of Michael McDowell on road courses, there's honestly very few that are better than that team. In this next-gen car, he's always been one of the better drivers on these style tracks, even before this 7th-generation car. But I think that they've really hit on something here. I think they're a constant top 10 contender. The results show that. The running order shows that. And I think you throw in a guy like Travis Peterson as the crew chief now, that team is just so in sync at this point in the season. And I think they've been in sync specifically on the road courses. And it's been little things here and there. They're still getting those top 10s. They're still leading laps, getting stage points. But it's a pit road hiccup here and there. It's the wrong strategy call by 2 tires or whatever. And they're that close to getting a win. And I really think that it could come very soon. I will say I have a lot more confidence in Michael McDowell winning at Watkins Glen, but I think he'll have an easy top 5, top 10 day at Indianapolis. Keep in mind, he's -3 in the standings right now, so very much within reach. And out of all the drivers on the bubble, these next 3 races cater specifically to Michael McDowell with 2 road courses and Daytona to close it out. So I love him a lot this week. He has 2 7th-place finishes and a 12th-place finish on road courses this year. And over the last 2 years, he has 6 top 10s in 9 races with a 10.1 average and a best finish of 3rd, which came last year at Sonoma. To put it simply, Michael McDowell is, I would say, a top 3 car in this next-gen car on road courses, and I would also call him a lock. His value for DFS is staggering at $7,500. I don't really understand how it's that cheap. You could also have thrown him in the value picks category, but I see him as a sleeper for the win. That's why I put him in here. But I love both Michael McDowell and Chris Buescher. Michael McDowell's race winner odds are plus 2,200. Again, DFS is 7,500. And I think any of these 4 drivers, Christopher Bell, AJ Allmendinger, Chris Buescher, or Michael McDowell, could win this race at Indianapolis.
Yeah, I feel more confidently about those 4 drivers than our 4 favorites. I kind of let off by saying that, but it bears mentioning again. And it really is so interesting, the fact that these 3 races, they just happen coincidentally to coincide with the strengths of the bubble drivers. Like you said, as good of a 3 races as you can ask for Michael McDowell, as good of a 2 out of those 3 races you could ask for AJ Allmendinger. And I think we could definitely expect Ty Gibbs, a guy that's going to run well. We've seen Daniel Suarez win in a road course. It just makes this next few weeks that much more interesting, and I cannot wait to see how it all plays out. As we just discussed, some really good values in our sleepers category. Those are guys that we very well think could go out there and win the race. But as we shift to our value picks category, guys that have more of an outside chance at the win, don't necessarily expect them to be in victory lane as much as the drivers we just discussed, but certainly guys that can make you some really good money based on where Vegas has them valued this week. And I think it's a conversation that's got to start with our old reliable at road courses this year, and really a lot of tracks this year, Ricky Stenhouse Jr., between both Indy road course races and 2 road course races this year. A 10.8 average finish, and that includes an 11th and a 13th at the Indy road course the last couple of years, which, again, very respectable. And that's not taking into consideration the fact that this season has been the best of Ricky Stenhouse Jr.'s career. So I think we can expect to see an even better result than the 10.8 average finish that he's posted at road course races, including Indy, over this year and those last couple of years. He's definitely a safer pick, a guy that, again, I don't know that I expect him to go out and win the race unless there's some kind of a bold strategy call, but very low cost. $5,500 in daily fantasy, for me, is borderline lock territory based on how consistent he's been at these tracks this year. Proven road course results where it counts, and I think that Ricky Stenhouse Jr. is a guy that if you could pick like a top 5 daily fantasy MVPs of the 2023 season, he's been one of the most consistent drivers for us. So I really feel pretty good about including him in the lineup this week. And then how about a guy that's coming off of a top 10 day at his home track and coming off being a newlywed? Congratulations to Eric Jones, coming off 2 top 10s in his last 3 races, and a 12.8 average finish over the last 5 races. The 43 team has been trending in the right direction as well. A 15.5 average finish on road courses last year, and a 15th and 17th finishes respectively at the Indy road course the last 2 years. So I think a guy that certainly could go out there, finish in the top 15, especially considering the momentum he has right now and coming off a strong run at Michigan. Very good value. That's why he's one of our value picks. 6,300 in daily fantasy is another one that, pick your poison between that or Stenhouse at 5,500. Those are both great values along with the next 2 that you have to name.
Yes, and that was a 15th and 7th place finish, respectively, for Eric Jones, by the way. I think you're looking at both those drivers as top 15 plays, so keep an eye on where they qualify, but both seem like very safe and cost-efficient bets for DFS. I'm going to go with the high end of a value pick for this week, and it's going to be our runner-up finisher from last year, Austin Cindric. We got to pick a Penske guy to Penske-owned track, right? Finished 12th at Michigan, which I'm considering a lot of positive momentum and one of their stronger days in what's been a really tough season for Austin Cindric. But the one thing that's been a constant for him in his career in Cup, in Xfinity, is his road course racing status. He finished 6th at both Chicago and COTA this year, had a 9.3 average on road courses in 2022, which was among the best. And we mentioned AJ as one of the 2 drivers with top 10s in both races at the Indy road course. Well, Cindric's the other driver, and I mentioned he finished runner-up last year. He also has an Xfinity win here. I think Austin Cindric is a very sneaky pick, not only for a good quality top 5 day, but even maybe for the win. I mean, he's been in contention both these races. His value's plus 2,500. Chris Buescher's won the past 2 races, so honestly, I think anything's possible. We've seen Ford close the gap considerably to the Chevys and the Toyotas, so why not roll with Austin Cindric? I think he's also a borderline lock in my opinion. I think you think of the road courses, and this is the one, in my opinion, along with COTA, that are probably the 2 best for him on the circuit. So Austin Cindric, borderline lock at $8,100 for DFS, and worth looking at for a race winner at plus 2,500, but again, going to be more inclined to look at those top 5, top 10 bets for him. And then finally, we will go with our Michigan moneymaker once again and parlay that into another strong run at Indianapolis. We're going to go with Corey LaJoie once again. Made me look really good last week. He was, on a really tough stretch going into Michigan, but he just signed this contract extension, and we just kind of looked at the data to go based off of for Michigan, and what do you know? It was a really, really good day. He had a top 10 car, finished top 15. My only concerns going into this race would be retaliation from Ryan Blaney. The Sunday portion of the race that happened at Michigan, there was a little on-track scuffle where LaJoie got into Blaney, got loose, challenging for a top 10 spot. And he was very remorseful, as he always is, very observant and aware of his actions. But Ryan Blaney was a little bit tougher to convince and calm down. And I think even going into Monday, there was still some ill will towards LaJoie. So I'm curious to see how Ryan Blaney and Corey LaJoie go about business come Sunday. But I think should things, go right for LaJoie, it's a clean day on track, you're looking at another top 20 finish for this team, maybe even another top 15. So I sampled 5 races for the value picks. I did the 2 Indy road course races and the 3 road course races this year, which included the Chicago Street Course, if you want to include that as a road course race. But anyway, I sampled those 5 races, so a really good size. And Corey LaJoie finished top 20 in all 5 of those races. So a very sneaky and underrated pick for this week, in my opinion. Again, top 20 in those 5 races. He's finished top 20 12 times this season, which is a career best so far through 23 races. And you look at his road course races this season, 11th, 20th, and 14th. So he's actually been sneakily very consistent on these tracks in 2023. Very consistent top 20, top 15 play. That's what I'm looking for once again at Indianapolis. And his value is also really, really good for DFS at $5,200. So much like our sleepers, I like our value picks a lot this week.
And as you said from the top, these are the kinds of tracks that we have had great success here on the Money Stop this year. That is 12 drivers, though, 12 that we feel pretty good about, especially the bottom 8 of those 12. So as we dwindle this down to 6, which is one from each tier from each of us, I'm going to take Martin Truex Jr. from the favorites tier, AJ Allmendinger from the sleepers tier, and Ricky Stenhouse Jr. from the value picks tier.
Very nice. I'm going to go with Tyler Reddick as my favorite, Mr. Back-to-Back Chris Buescher as my sleeper, and then Austin Cindric as my value pick for this week. And I also, really quick, before we move on to our big money bets, I want to throw one more thing out there, because this weekend we have a veritable who's who of ringers in this race. Obviously, SVG is racing. We have Jenson Button, Brody Kostecki, Andy Lally, Mike Rockenfeller, Kobayashi racing for 2311 Racing. This is a tough one for me as far as DFS, because I think you look at all these names. Obviously, SVG's, you're going to have the most confidence in him seeing what he did at Chicago, but the value is just way too steep at $10,100 for DFS. You look at guys like Kobayashi racing for 2311. Obviously, the equipment's going to be there, but it's going to be his first NASCAR Cup Series start. You just don't know what that's going to look like. He's in the $7,000 range for DFS, so it's a bit steep for me to kind of put that trust into someone in their Cup debut at a track where, as you said, pretty much every driver in this field has more laps run than a lot of these ringers. I guess if I had to throw one more out there that's worth looking at, I would say Jenson Button for Rick Ware Racing. We've documented how that team's kind of performed this season and their increase in that regard. Also, Rick Ware finished top 25 last week at Michigan, so I think it's been a positive season for that team. I think Jenson Button had a really strong showing in Chicago. Top 15 car, was running top 10 before some pit road mishaps, but I think there's just too much inexperience, in my opinion, to put any trust in any of these ringers aside from SVG or maybe Jenson Button for DFS. So I didn't want to move on from this episode and not talk about all those ringers racing in this race. So that's kind of my 2 cents.
Yeah, it's a little overwhelming how many of these ringers there are, that some of which have Cup starts, some of which do not. And I think that if there's one thing that SVG proved at Chicago, it's that you can come into this sport cold turkey and put up a really good result. That was a very outlandish result, I'll say, because it was our first ever street course. As I mentioned, and you brought up moments ago again, Cole, the fact that every regular Cup Series driver has turned laps at Indy. I don't think you're going to see that kind of result again, but it wouldn't surprise me at all to see one of these ringers finish in the top 10, whether it's a Rockenfeller, a Kobayashi, SVG, Kostecki. I think that there's definitely the potential for it to happen, but it's just a little overwhelming with there being that many of them. I think some will catch on better than others, but I don't feel confidently enough steering you in one direction or another based on the fact that we have nothing to go off of. So if I got to pick one of them, I'm just going to say Jenson Button, because he has the most Cup experience in these next-gen cars over any of the other road course ringers that are making cameos this week at Indy. So I'm tempering expectations. I don't know if I'm tempering expectations, actually. I could see them going out having a good race. I just don't know which one it's going to be. I'll be completely upfront about that.
Yeah, no, I agree 1,000%. I mean, I think Button's going to be my go-to of those ringers as well, given his experience in this car. And then obviously Kobayashi is going to be very interesting, being that he's racing for 2311. So we've seen Travis Pastrana put up good results and good runs in that car. So I think it's very interesting and as you said, overwhelming, perfect word for all these ringers in this race. But SVG and Button would be my 2 that I would gravitate towards.
And you know what? You mentioned that he's racing for 2311 Kobayashi. How about the driver that we said that the 45 is the best team and driver at road courses in the next-gen era? I think that can certainly rub off on that car this week. And again, I'm looking at drivers that we know are going to have good speed in the car, whether it's 2311, Trackhouse for SVG. I think there's a couple of ways you can go about it, but there's not really a right or wrong answer as far as which of these guys is going to go out there and put up a really good result. So that'll be it for our, I guess, Take It to the Bank segment, but we still have some unfinished business. We're going to go through some prop bets, some parlay bets. Starting with big money bets, Cole. These are specifically our favorite prop bets of the week. We just discussed how there's some really good value out there this week. I think this is one of the better weeks for big money bets in recent weeks. I think there wasn't a ton out there the last 2 weeks at Richmond and Michigan. What are your favorite big money bets of the week?
Yeah, I'm pumped for this week. I think, as you mentioned, the last couple of weeks, it's been a little bit tough to forecast given the unpredictable nature of green flag racing and the chaos that ensued in Michigan on top of that. So I think whenever you go to a road course, that's where you really look to capitalize on those big money bets that we talk about. And case in point, I think I got to bring up first Tyler Reddick, top 5, plus 110. Just given his status on these tracks in this next-gen era, I don't even know how it's possible for him to be plus 110, but I think that's definitely one that I'm going to be heavily considering. Another one is one that you brought up during your analysis of the sleepers. AJ Allmendinger to finish top 5 at plus 210 for a driver who has not finished worse than 7th in 5 total starts at this track. That is a lock all day. And then for 2 top 10 prop bets, I love Michael McDowell, as we always do on road courses and super speedways, plus 105 to finish top 10. And then finally, for the same value, plus 105, Austin Cindric to finish top 10, who has finished top 10 in both starts at this track in the next-gen car. So those would be my 4, and those are 4 that I would definitely throw at least $20 on. I feel very strongly about those 4.
I couldn't agree more with you on all of those big money bets. We're completely on the same page about all of those, and that's definitely one way to make money. I think another is this week we had some requests to review a few parlayable bets, which are head-to-head driver bets that you can parlay with one another. As of the time recording this, we've got 5 uploaded on BetMGM that we can kind of discuss going head-to-head with certain drivers, beginning with a couple of those road course ringers, Cole. Shane Van Gisbergen is minus 190 to finish ahead of Brody Kostecki, which would be plus 145. And this is an interesting one because, again, SVG's got not only a cup start but a win in the next-gen car. But out of the remaining road course ringers, Vegas has Brody Kostecki valued at inside the top 15 for a win. I think 12th highest odds to win the race. So this is one that I definitely could see being more of a coin toss than the other ones that we'll review here. But I would have to give the upper hand to Shane Van Gisbergen just because he's literally won in this car before. I think, again, we're both on the same page to temper expectations with SVG. He's not going to be, as you said before, 8/10 ahead of the field. You know, every driver in the field has laps here. Brody Kostecki does not, though. So if you're going to stack him head-to-head with someone, I think this could be a value if you parlay it with one of the other ones we discussed here.
Yeah, and I also wanted to preface this segment by saying, yes, there are 5 head-to-head matchups out there, but I don't think it's necessarily a given that you have to rope them all in together and do 5 head-to-head matchup parlays, only because, like, there's going to be some matchups like, Kobayashi and Jenson Button. That's kind of a toss-up right there. That's Kobayashi making his first start in the Cup Series, and then Jenson Button driving for Rick Ware with experience in this car. So I think going into this segment, it's pick the ones you're extremely confident in, that one's going to finish ahead of the other. We'll go through, for all intents and purposes, and go through all 5 of these, but just keep that in mind when you're making these bets. The next one we're going to look at is the 2 road course aces of this generation. Chase Elliott head-to-head with Tyler Reddick. I'm picking Tyler Reddick at minus 140 over Chase Elliott easily. I just don't like where that 9 team is at right now. I think this is one of their weaker road courses, and Tyler Reddick obviously dominated this race last year, dominated COTA this year. He's been the best by far on road courses in this next-gen car. I think it's no-brainer to put Tyler Reddick ahead of Chase Elliott. And again, they're in a desperate situation. They're going just for the win, Chase Elliott, so he very well could win this race, and I wouldn't be surprised if he did. But I think based on outright speed, Tyler Reddick should have the upper hand in this matchup.
Yeah, Reddick is the safest pick in the field this week, in my opinion. And I'm really glad you brought up the fact that just because there are 5 parlayable options does not mean you have to use all 5. I think that's the biggest betting mistake in general people make, whether it's NASCAR, football, you name it. I think people like to see the number of the payback they're going to get continue to rise. in spite of the fact that their confidence in some of the other legs of the parlay might not be reflected the more it goes up. So I completely agree with that advice there. And if I'm going to craft a parlay this week with these 5 potential head-to-head bets, I'm starting there because I feel very confidently, exactly like you said, Cole, that Tyler Reddick can finish ahead of Chase Elliott. The second most confident I am out of the 5 head-to-head bets would be Michael McDowell to finish ahead of Justin Haley, minus 175 with Tyler Reddick. I think that's a pretty solid parlay there to do those two together. If you did like Justin Haley better, again, we haven't mentioned him in this episode, but he is plus 135 for the win. I think we've given you several reasons why Michael McDowell would be a great pick for this week. So I'm a big fan of that one. If you're going to parlay any two, those would be my two.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And then the final two that we have a really enticing one. Martin Truex Jr. head-to-head with Chris Buescher. I guess the two best drivers in the sport the last 2 races, maybe. But Truex is minus 250 to finish ahead of Chris Buescher, while Chris Buescher is plus 190 to finish ahead of Martin Truex Jr. Personally, I like Chris Buescher over Truex this week. And if you parlay all 5 of those, I think this brings up your odds payout a lot more, being that it is above even. But it's a tough one to kind of decipher, given that Truex is the best driver in the sport right now, but Chris Buescher is the hottest driver in the sport, with the road course stats to back it up. And the final one that I alluded to was going to be Kobayashi and Jenson Button. I picked Kobayashi over Jenson Button, just given the equipment, at minus 160 over him. Jenson Button's plus 125. Honestly, I feel like that should be a lock, but at the same time, we talked about it. Button has starts in this next-gen car. He's had success in this next-gen car on the road courses, so bit of a toss-up, but I think if you got to pick one, I would pick Kobayashi over him.
I agree. I think we did a pretty good job breaking all that down, but as we look at how to actually lump those together, I think a good place to start is picking Tyler Reddick over Chase Elliott and Michael McDowell over Justin Haley. If you parlay just those two, your odds are going to be plus 169. Then I think the other 3 are enough of a 50-50, or at least in our opinion, like close enough to being one way or another. You can pick your poison out of those 3. If you like SVG versus Kostecki better, if you like Kobayashi versus Button better, out of those, I kind of like the idea of picking Buescher over Truex because I think that's where the best value lies at plus 190 for Buescher. Whereas if I had to pick the other 2, I'm going to say SVG over Kostecki and Kobayashi over Button. Those are both favored to happen. But if you add Chris Buescher into a three-leg parlay with Reddick over Elliott and McDowell over Haley, that brings your parlay to plus 681. So to be honest with you, I kind of like the idea of picking both. Put some money on your favorite 2 legs of the head-to-head parlay, which is going to be a payout of probably around plus 200, depending on which 2 you like. And then maybe add in a third with a little bit of a smaller dose of money. That would be my advice. I think that there's a few ways it can go, but the cardinal note here, again, is that you don't have to do all 5. That's for sure, especially with some of the unknowns there.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. I think if I'm looking at a third one to lock in, I love SVG over Kostecki. I just think he has the experience. He has the win. This is Kostecki's first Cup start, and he's driving for RCR, which isn't quite as good as Trackhouse Racing. But I think that was great advice. I think I'm picking Michael McDowell, Tyler Reddick, and SVG as my locks for head-to-head parlays this week.
Well, this will be another fun one. I think this is a fun change of pace, how we went from a mile track to a super speedway, now to our first of back-to-back road courses. We've seen some fun finishes at the Indy road course over the past couple of seasons, and we hope this one finishes up with you putting some money in your pocket and filling up your bank account. So that's going to be the end of the line. We're going to drop the jack here on the Money Stop ahead of the Verizon 200 at the Brickyard. Who will be kissing the bricks on Sunday? We'll find out. But first, Cole, we've got some unfinished business. We got to pick our race winner picks. I chose first last week. I went with William Byron, who had a strong showing going until the later portion of Sunday's event. You had Brad to win. He wound up top 5, and his teammate and driver that actually races for him, Chris Buescher, wound up winning a week ago. So you had the upper hand certainly last week, picking 2 drivers that finished in the top 10. And as you get to pick first this week, Cole, you get the first favorite, I get the first sleeper. What are you going with?
I got to be honest with you, I have no idea who's going to win this race. I think to play it safe, the easiest answer is got to be Tyler Reddick. Dominated this race last year, dominated COTA this year, and he's just flat out been the best on road courses in this next-gen car. So I'll go with the easy layup and pick Tyler Reddick as my favorite for the win.
Yeah, that's the low-hanging fruit for sure. That's probably what I would have done if I had first pick. Seeing as I don't, I think I showed how I feel about AJ Allmendinger pretty early in this episode. I just think that, there's been no one more consistent at this track, and I really get the sense he's been biding his time for this one. He knows that this is the big week, and even next week, but specifically this week is the big week for him to make some waves in terms of the playoff picture. I think AJ Allmendinger is going to go out and win the Indy road course. And as for a sleeper, we're looking at Austin Cindric and down in the odds. I'm going to pick Kobayashi as my sleeper. He is plus 3,500 for the win. I think, listen, we saw Trackhouse Racing's third car, SVG, win at the Chicago Street Course, and that certainly was some that rubbed off from, again, you saw wins from Ross Chastain and Daniel Suarez at road courses last year. Well, we've seen Tyler Reddick be the dominant car at road courses this year. Why not Kobayashi in his first start? I think that this could be a potentially good value. I like the idea of picking the good equipment for a guy that knows how to get around a road course.
Very nice. Yeah, for me, I got to go with Austin Cindric. I think this has been one of the better drivers on this track since it's come onto the Cup Series circuit. I think it's one of his best tracks on the Cup Series circuit in general. And I think you just look at his road course pedigree, the fact that he's one of 2 drivers to finish top 10 in both these races since it's been added to the schedule. It seems like a no-brainer that Austin Cindric's going to be due for a top 5 or a top 10, maybe top 5 day. So he's got to be my easy sleeper for the win.
Well, again, it'll be a fun one. The Verizon 200 will take place 2:35 Eastern Time at the Brickyard, 2:35 Eastern Time on Sunday. This will be a very exciting race. 3 races to go in the playoffs. The intensity and urgency and panic button is ramping up, so it should be a fun one irregardless. And you've got all these great playoff potential drivers that could be poised for a good week. So we're going to drop the jack on the most important stop of the day. We hope, again, that it ends with you putting some money in your pocket. For Cole, I'm Steven Cusimano. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Best of luck with all your betting for the Verizon 200 at the Brickyard, and we'll see you next week.